Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I think Venerable Guangjing doesn't know that the class is tonight. Okay, good evening, everyone. Okay, we will continue now with the study of the Sammādiṭṭhi Sutta. This is Sutta number 9 in the Majjhima Nikaya. And last time I spoke about the different kinds of right view of Sammādiṭṭhi according to the Buddha's teaching. I spoke about the distinction between the mundane right view, which is basically the right understanding, acceptance of the law of karmic causation, the law, the cause and effect of morally significant actions, the law that wholesome and unwholesome, good and bad actions produce their corresponding fruits or effects. And then there is the supramundane or world-transcending right view, the Lokuttara Sammādiṭṭhi. This is the right view that leads to final liberation. And this right view can be the right view, either it can be first a conceptual right view, that is, the right view of one who has a clear conceptual understanding of the principles that are conducive to liberation. These would be such principles as the Four Noble Truths, dependent origination, and the three marks of existence: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness. Okay, so this conceptual right view then becomes the basis for what I call the penetrative right view. This is the right view as realization, or right view as the wisdom that sees into the ultimate nature of things. And so based on the conceptual right view, one develops insight through the practice of Vipassana bhavana, insight meditation. And then when that insight as it develops, it goes deeper and deeper into an understanding of the nature of things. And then when it comes to its full maturity, then it leads to this penetration or breakthrough into the ultimate truth of the Dhamma. And that is the true world-transcending, the true supramundane right view. And this right view, this penetrating right view, can be attained by the disciple in training. This is called the Seka, the disciple from the stage of stream enterer up to the stage of once returner, stage of non-returner. And then that right view comes to its fulfillment with the attainment of the stage of Arahat, That is called the right view of one who has completed the training. Okay, and so now, this is just a summary of what I covered last week. And now Venerable Sariputta is going to explain the meaning of right view with emphasis upon the world-transcending right view of the disciple in training, the right view of the trainee, the right view of one who has entered upon the way to final liberation, but still has not yet completed the work of cultivating the path. And we know that this is the case from the way Venerable Sariputta opens the discourse. He says, "In what way is a noble disciple one of right view, whose view is straight?" Okay, this could be anybody of right view, but then he says, "who has perfect confidence or unwavering confidence in the Dhamma." This is avecha pasada. That is a kind of tag word or key expression, which indicates definitely that this is the right view of somebody who has reached at least the stage of sotapanna, stream entry. Because perfect confidence or unwavering confidence in the Dhamma is one of the four defining features, one of the four factors of a stream enterer, along with unwavering confidence in the Buddha, unwavering confidence in the Aryan Sangha, and observing very, very strictly and carefully the 5 precepts. Okay, and then Sariputta goes on and he says, "who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma." That expression, arrived, again it means that the disciple has come into the fold of the true Dhamma, of the liberating Dhamma. Okay, after opening the discourse in this way, the monks expressed their interest in learning the meaning of Sariputta's statement, and so Sariputta is going to begin elaborating or expounding the meaning of right view. And now we come to the first major section of the discourse. This is the section dealing with the wholesome and the unwholesome. Okay, taking the text. Venerable Sariputta says, "When, friends, a noble disciple understands the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, and he understands the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, in that way he is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect or unwavering confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma." Okay, this is what is called I should introduce these two terms. They're useful to know in Pali. Udesa and Nidesa. Okay, Udesa might be translated the condensed presentation of the teaching, and Nidesa is the elaborate presentation of the teaching. So very often when you read the suttas, you see the Buddha will begin with a paragraph in which he presents certain key ideas. It's kind of the opening paragraph either of a whole sutta or of a section of the sutta. Then, that opening paragraph, that is the udesa, condensed presentation. Then the Buddha or the speaker will start raising the question about each of the parts of that condensed presentation. What is the meaning of this, or in what way is this to be understood? And then go on to explain how it should be understood. That is the nidesa, the elaborate explanation. Okay, so here in paragraph 3, that is the udesa, condensed presentation of this section. And now with section 4, we are going to get the nidesa, the elaboration, explaining each part of this brief statement. So first, Sariputta raises the questions about each of these terms. What is the unwholesome? What is the root of the unwholesome? What is the wholesome? What is the root of the wholesome? Okay, these are 4 extremely important terms for understanding the Buddha's teaching. And usually the Buddha begins by taking the negative side, then the positive side. So on the negative side, we begin with the unwholesome. This is akusala. And the positive side. Okay, the word, well, these 2 terms, kusala, akusala, there's sometimes a kind of ongoing debate how to translate them. Should it be wholesome and unwholesome, or skillful or unskillful, good, bad? Different people have different preferences. The commentaries give us some helpful indications to understand the way these terms are actually used, or let's say the meaning that can be derived from the use of these terms. And so it's quite useful to consult the commentaries on this. And the commentaries explain the term unwholesome. They take a number of uses of this term, and they take 3 aspects of what is akusala. So what is akusala, they say, should be understood as what is unhealthy, what is, call it psychologically, spiritually unhealthy. That's one aspect. Another aspect is what is blameworthy, blamable, what's open to censure, to criticism. So this is looking at what is unwholesome from the moral point of view, considering it to be something which is open to moral condemnation. Then the third aspect considers the unwholesome from the karmic point of view. What is unwholesome is that which produces, when it ripens, it produces painful results. And so we have these three perspectives on the unwholesome. Psychologically, spiritually, it's unhealthy. Morally, it's blameworthy. Karmically, it produces painful results or suffering. And then the opposite of that, what is wholesome, can also be understood from these three angles. So what is wholesome is what is healthy, psychologically, spiritually healthy, beneficial. Morally, it is what is praiseworthy, commendable, morally commendable, or blameless, morally blameless. And from the karmic point of view, it is that which produces pleasant or favorable karmic results. And again, the commentaries say that what is unwholesome is what is connected with defilements. Call it what is defiled or contaminated by defilements. While what is unwholesome is what is undefiled or not contaminated by defilements. And the unwholesome and the wholesome have a very wide range in the Buddha's teaching. They cover many, many states of mind, many intentions, many types of actions. And so we could say that the Buddha has divided human conduct, thought, attitudes, emotions, right down the middle into these two compartments of the wholesome and the unwholesome. But here in this sutta, Venerable Sariputta has selected, we call this the most important category of the unwholesome and the unwholesome in terms of actions, possible types of actions. And to represent the unwholesome, he uses the 10 courses or 10 classes of unwholesome karma. 10 types, main types of unwholesome action. I've gone through these 10 types of unwholesome action in a number of classes, but now we're going to look at them in a somewhat different angle. First, I'll just go through them in a general way. We have 3 which are types of unwholesome bodily action. Killing living beings, or the destruction of life, taking what is not given, and misconduct in sensual pleasures, or sexual misconduct. Okay, 4 in terms of verbal action. False speech, malicious speech, that's speech that divides others, harsh speech, and gossip or idle chatter. Then those are 4 that are verbal, and then 3 that are entirely mental. Covetousness, or desiring the possessions of others, ill will, it's strong anger or hatred against others to the point of wishing them harm, and then wrong view. And by wrong view here is meant specifically wrong views that deny the validity of moral distinctions, that deny the effectiveness of our actions in producing results for ourselves in the future. If you want to see a more detailed treatment of these 10 types of unwholesome action, then you can look in Sutta number 41. That is the Salayaka Sutta. We went through that sutta quite a long time ago, so we don't have to go through it again now, but just to refresh your memory at your own leisure, to see these 10 courses of unwholesome action, how they're explained in detail in the suttas. You'll find the standard definitions there. Okay, at one level, we look at these 10 courses of action simply as types of actions. But now, what the Buddha does is to take an action and then investigate what that action actually means at the level of living experience. And when the Buddha made this investigation, made this inquiry, he came up with the sort of statement, the discovery, the determination that it is volition, what he calls chaitana, that is the essential factor in karma. There's a famous statement, Chaitanahang bhikkhave kammang vadami. It is volition, O monks, that I call kamma. Then he says, for having achaitayitva kamang karoti kayena vachaya manasa. For having willed, for having intended, one then creates kamma or performs an action through body, speech, or mind. So when we take these 10 courses of action, for the first 7 of them, the bodily action, the verbal action, the decisive factor in those types of actions is volition or intention. When somebody takes life, when somebody kills, what actually creates the kamma of killing is, in the first instance, it is the desire to kill, the wish to kill, the intention of killing. And that intention, it's a factor of the mind, and that factor of the mind will then usually it will use the body as the instrument of taking life. And so for this reason we call killing a bodily action. So sometimes the killing can take place using speech as its instrument. For example, when people get together, conspire to kill, one person just sits there. Usually it's like the big man, the chief. He gives the order to just the henchman. You go out and kill so-and-so. You go and assassinate that person. And then it's the little henchmen who go out and pull the trigger or plunge the knife. But it's the big man who's sitting there who gives the orders. He also gets the karma of killing if death takes place. Similarly, in war, when generals give the orders to their troops to kill, the generals also get the karma of killing. They don't escape just because they're giving commands. And so it's the intention that initiates the action, but for the action, the karma, to actually reach its fullness, that intention has to achieve its aim. If somebody has the intention of killing, tries to kill, but the attempt to kill is not successful, the person doesn't get hit by the bullet, the person gets injured but doesn't die, then the karma of killing, it's not committed. So the person who attempts the act of killing gets a very heavy karma, but it's not the same as the karma of killing, because the karma, the intention, has to fulfill its purpose in order for it to generate the full karma. Okay, so in the case of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, it's intention, volition, motivating the body. Generally the body. And it's that which creates the unwholesome karma. In the case of the 4 types of verbal karma, verbal action, again, it is intention. I want to deceive somebody, so I tell a lie. It is the wish to deceive, the intention to deceive, the intention to mislead that is responsible for the karma of telling a deliberate lie. But that intention uses the vocal apparatus to communicate a falsehood. And when that statement gets communicated, whether the other person believes it or not, as long as that person understands what is said, it gives rise to the karma of telling a deliberate lie. Similarly, in the other cases, in the case of covetousness, ill will, and wrong view, the intention is there, and it's the intention that creates the karma, but here covetousness itself is equivalent to greed or craving. So the unwholesome course of karma arises from greed or craving, which reaches such a level of intensity that it takes the form of a desire to acquire the possessions of others. And ill will is anger or hatred, another mental factor associated with volition. And this is anger or hatred which reaches such a level of strength that it takes the form of a thought, a wish that somebody will experience great harm or suffering, that other beings will suffer. Ordinary anger or hatred, it's unwholesome, but it's not an unwholesome course of karma. It becomes a course of karma when it becomes so strong that it manifests as an actual wish that somebody will undergo harm or suffering. And again, wrong view is a particular mental factor. It's a mental factor in its own right, simply called wrong view. And this wrong view becomes an unwholesome course of karma when it takes the form of a view that denies the validity of moral distinctions, that denies that we are responsible for our actions, that denies that our actions will have some kind of rebound effect upon ourselves in the future. Okay, I've been using the expression courses of karma. In Pali, it's kammapada. The word kammapada, actually it could be translated a path of karma, because the Pali word pata actually means a path. And the English word path, Pali word pata, are etymologically related to each other. So you see, Pali, very easy language to learn. So we create many, many types of actions, but what is the defining mark of a path of action is an action which is of such a distinctive type that it can take on the role of governing the rebirth process. It is that type of action which can, at the moment of death, come up to the surface of consciousness and then govern the movement of consciousness from one life to the next and bring about a particular type of rebirth. So this is why it's especially important to avoid these unwholesome courses of karma. Okay, and where do these unwholesome courses of karma originate from? Okay, they all originate from the mind. That's why in the Dhammapada, the first verse of the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, Mano pubhangama dhamma, mano setta, mano maya, manasa cha, padutena bhasati va karoti va tatonang dukam anveti, chakang va vahato padang. That is, all dhammas, all phenomena arise from the mind. They are all governed by the mind, and they are all fashioned or made by the mind. But within the mind is of many different types. Within the mind, what is it in particular that gives rise to these unwholesome types of action? I already said that the action is intention, that it's intention that is the motivating factor. But what governs the intention is the particular root from which that intention arises. And the Buddha looked very deeply into the mind and found that all unwholesome actions, all unwholesome qualities of mind are all in some way caused or connected with three basic mental factors. And these he calls the unwholesome roots. They're called the unwholesome roots first because they are unwholesome themselves, and second because they give rise to everything else that is unwholesome. And these three unwholesome roots are greed, hatred, and delusion. Lobha, dosa, moha. So in paragraph 5, the Venerable Sariputta raises the question, what is the root of the unwholesome? And then he says, greed is a root of the unwholesome. Hate is a root of the unwholesome. Delusion is a root of the unwholesome. This is called the root of the unwholesome. Then one can work out at one's own convenience or leisure. One could work out connections between particular unwholesome roots and particular courses of unwholesome karma. And sometimes the relations can become quite more complex than you would think at first sight. For example, we usually think killing of living beings has to spring from hatred, but actually if you reflect, you see often people kill from greed. They want to get people's wealth, people in one country, one territory that belongs to people in another country, so they'll kill them to get the territory. People will grasp on to deluded views, wrong ideologies, and on that basis they'll kill. So we could say delusion then becomes the strong root of killing. And so all three of these can be at the root of many of these types of unwholesome actions. But generally it's held that though greed and hatred are both unwholesome roots, it's said that at any given mind moment, one cannot have greed and hatred simultaneously because they're of different electrical charges, so to speak, different valences. One is like positive charge, the other negative charge. And so when there's greed, at the same time you can have hatred. But greed will often give rise to hatred. Why did he get the prize, not me? So you're greedy for the prize, then you start hating that person who got the prize or the praise from others. And if there's hatred, then there won't be greed. Is this true in the Abhidhamma kosha system also? But whenever there's greed or hatred, they are both connected with delusion. So whenever there's greed, there's delusion. Whenever there's hatred, there's delusion. But when there's delusion, there doesn't have to be greed or hatred. Delusion can exist on its own without greed or hatred. Okay, then we come to the wholesome side of the mind, the wholesome side of action. And this is illustrated by the 10 courses of wholesome action. And 7 of these are abstentions. Abstaining from killing, abstaining from killing living beings, that is wholesome. Abstention from taking what is not given is wholesome. Abstention from sexual misconduct is wholesome. Okay, those are 3 types of wholesome bodily action. Then there are 4 types of wholesome verbal action. Abstention from false speech, abstention from malicious or divisive speech, abstention from harsh speech, abstention from gossip or idle chatter is wholesome. Okay, it's important to understand this word abstention because there are different types of abstention. And we speak in the Buddhist tradition, we speak of 3 ways or 3 types of abstention. One of these, we might call this spontaneous or natural abstention. This is the case where a person has been told, or he's learned through his education, it's not good to kill, not good to steal, not good to tell lies, and so on. And so just through that training, when a person meets an opportunity, say, to kill, say, a young boy, his friends say, we're going hunting or we're going fishing, come along and join us. He wants to join his friends, but then he thinks, it's not good to kill, so I won't go killing, I won't go hunting, I won't go fishing. Or else, maybe somebody starts getting into an argument with somebody else. The volume of the voices start to rise. And then he's tempted to start yelling at the other person angrily. But then he thinks, it's not good to speak harshly to others. And so then he cools down and restrains himself. Okay, this we call the natural or spontaneous abstinence. And this is good, it's wholesome, but the natural, spontaneous abstinence is somewhat weak, and if one isn't careful, one could easily be tempted to break the abstinence. The friends start putting pressure on him and say, come on, we're going to have a great time, you don't want to be left out. What are you going to do? It's a nice, sunny Sunday afternoon. And then he's going to think, all of my friends, they'll be making fun of me. Okay, I'll go along fishing today. My parents won't know. I'll borrow one of their friends' fishing rods. Or else one gets into the argument, voices start rising, and then one loses control and starts shouting. Okay, so to safeguard against that comes the next stronger type of abstinence, and this is called abstinence through undertaking. And that is abstinence through undertaking precepts or through undertaking the training. And this is the case where one consciously and deliberately undertakes the precepts to abstain from these things that are unwholesome. Usually in Buddhism, for lay people, we give 5 precepts. But one also understands that all of these 10 types of unwholesome action are unwholesome. And one can form a determination to observe all of these 10, to abstain from these 10 types of unwholesome action. At least to abstain from 7 of them. And when one abstains, then one has this stronger protection because one knows one has undertaken this precept. And so when one is tempted to overstep the boundaries and to commit one of these unwholesome actions, then one remembers that I have undertaken this precept and I have to observe this precept. And so the precept serves as a protection. Okay, the third type of abstinence is called abstinence by eradication. And this is the abstinence that takes place when, through developing the world-transcending path, one cuts off the certain defilements that are responsible for the transgression of these precepts. For example, even at the stage of stream entry, actually this isn't actually said in the text. It isn't said that the stream enterer is completely incapable of breaking the 5 precepts. It's just that the stream enterer observes these precepts dear to the Noble One. But anyway, when one cuts off defilements that are responsible for violations of the precepts, then one is no longer capable of breaking those precepts. Okay, so that's the meaning of abstention or abstaining, which applies to these first 7 courses of action. Then the other 3, what's called uncovetousness, is actually the mental factor of non-greed. Non-greed is not just the absence of greed, but it is a distinct mental factor which frees the mind temporarily from greed and which can express itself positively as generosity or as relinquishment, giving up. Non-ill will, again, is a mental factor, a distinct mental factor. Not just the absence of ill will, but it's a distinct mental factor which can express itself positively as loving kindness, as friendliness. And then right view is the mental factor which accepts, adopts, and holds, in this case, to the right view of moral responsibility for actions, the working of the law of karma. Okay, so those are the 10 courses of wholesome action. And when these 10 courses of unwholesome action become strongly ingrained in the mind, then they can take on the role of generating rebirth. And when they take on that role, then they will produce a fortunate or favorable rebirth. The unwholesome courses of action, they will produce the unfortunate rebirth in the lower realms. The wholesome courses of action will produce a favorable rebirth in a favorable state of existence. Okay, then the roots of the wholesome, all of these wholesome actions spring from wholesome states of mind, and those wholesome states of mind are states of mind that are rooted in the 3 good roots: non-greed, which positively is generosity, relinquishment; non-hatred, which positively is loving kindness or friendliness; and non-delusion, which positively is wisdom, right understanding. Okay, so those are the roots of the wholesome. Okay, now the Venerable Sariputta has elaborated the 4 terms that he introduced in the Udesa, in the condensed presentation of the teaching. The unwholesome, the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome, and the root of the wholesome. And the understanding of these 4 terms, he says, this defines the right view of one who has a straight view, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma, and who has arrived at this true Dhamma. In other words, all of these, the understanding of these 4 terms is part of the right view of the disciple in training, the one on the path. But now, paragraph 8 is going to show that the same right view can be developed, is to be developed, to the point where it leads to the complete elimination of defilements, and thereby it becomes the right view of the Arahant, the one beyond training. Okay, so here Venerable Sariputta says, when a noble disciple has thus understood the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, okay, at that point we might suppose he's a stream enterer. Now he entirely abandons the underlying tendency to lust. He abolishes the underlying tendency to aversion. Okay, by lust here, the word raga is used. We could probably assume that this is kama raga, sensual lust. So by abandoning these 2 underlying tendencies, here the key word is anusaya. Do you know the Chinese word for anusaya? Sui mian, right, sui mian. Okay, so the anusaya is the defilement which is anu means along with, and saya means lying, sense of lying down or sleeping. So swamyan is along with sleeping, sleeping along with. So it's a defilement in the stage in which it's sleeping along with the flow of the mind, even when it's not appearing in the surface of consciousness. And so the task for the disciple in training is to work at eliminating these underlying tendencies. And so two of these underlying tendencies are sensual lust, kamaraga, and aversion, patika. And when one eliminates these two latent tendencies, that is, or underlying tendencies, that is, marks the achievement of the stage of non-returner. But then he goes further and he extirpates the underlying tendency to the view and conceit I am. The text says, it's a little bit puzzling, it says, asmiti dittimana nusayang sam u hanitva. And what's puzzling is that the stream enterer should already have eliminated the view I am, because the stream enterer eliminates sakkaya ditthi, the view of an existing self. So it's something of a problem why the text says ditti mana anusaya, view and conceit I am. The commentary has to give a sort of roundabout explanation, not completely convincing. It says what he eliminates is the conceit I am, which is similar to a view. But there's nothing in the Pali that indicates similar or resembling, no word that indicates that. And so I have to say one suspects that there's been some textual corruption that something got added in which should not have been there. I think it would have been, the word ditti seems to have crept in somehow in the process of transmission. Because eliminating the conceit I am, asmi mana, that is one of the achievements that marks the transition from the stage of non-returner to the stage of arahant. And then the final achievement is abandoning ignorance completely, the last layer of ignorance, and arousing true knowledge, or full knowledge, vijja. He here and now, or in this present life, makes an end to suffering. Then this last sentence is a little bit puzzling too. The text says, in this way too, a noble disciple is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has perfect confidence in the Dhamma, and has arrived at this true Dhamma. It's a little puzzling here because some of the expressions here, perfect confidence, unwavering confidence in the Dhamma, that is, as I said, one of the hallmarks of the stream enterer, and also has arrived at this true Dhamma. Again, that's one of the hallmarks of the stream enterer. One has just entered the stream or come to the true Dhamma. But the Arhat has more than perfect confidence in the Dhamma. He's more than arrived at this true Dhamma. So it's something that's rather difficult to explain. Okay, at this point, I think I have to stop the explanation. I'm over the time limit. But if there's any over my time limit, there's still time for questions.
The first abstinence you referred to as...
I call it, the first of those three types of abstinence, I call it spontaneous abstinence or natural abstinence. This is the kind of abstinence that it might be induced by a person's training and education, but it's not reinforced by actually undertaking a precept, or perhaps in another religion, receiving a commandment.
And you were saying right view is a distinct mental factor that manifests as an understanding of karma, or is it...
I would say as an acceptance. Acceptance.
So it's less than the penetrative, experiential...
Oh, much, much less. Because this is right view as one of the 10 types of wholesome karma is considered a kind of mundane virtue. Right. This is actually the mundane right view. Right, okay. So this is not something specific to the Buddha's teaching. It can be had by those in different forms following other religions who hold that people are morally responsible for their actions and that some type of reward or retribution will come to them as a result of their actions. That right view, it might be distorted by some degree of what we would consider a wrong view if they think there's an almighty creator God that rewards and punishes them, or that there's an eternity of bliss for those who are good, eternity of torment for those who are bad. That would be a wrong view. But to the extent that they accept the idea of some retribution for good and bad actions, that would be some degree of right view. John?
You talked about greed and hatred, lobha and dosa, as not being possible to have all those both in the mind at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, like positive and negative.
Yeah.
Is it also valid to think of them as really being the same thing, and that two sides of the same coin? You know, greed being a craving to get something and bring it to you, and hatred being a craving to push something away.
One might think of them in that way, but if we use like the technical terminology of the Dhamma, then craving is identified with greed rather than with aversion as tanha. So you might find, like in strings of synonyms, tanha used together with lobha, with greed, and with raga. But one doesn't see something like patigha tanha, aversion craving. So when we use English, we could speak about a craving to push something away. But in taking the precise meanings of the Pali words, the word craving just falls on the greed side rather than on the aversion side. Paul, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had some good examples for example of hatred giving rise to greed, and delusion sort of being by itself.
Okay. An example of hatred giving rise to greed. Can anybody think of an example?
Didn't you say that they were opposites, that they could not be? I hadn't thought that hatred would be a cause for greed.
I said that they were opposites, and because they're opposites, they can't exist simultaneously. But they can be causes for one another. I said they can be causes for one another at different moments of time. And I gave an example that greed can give rise to hatred.
Maybe I have a good example. For example, one used to be very poor when he was young, and when that person grew up, that person became very greedy. From hatred, hate, being poor, to very greedy, getting younger.
Somebody hating his poverty, that being a motive for becoming greedy. I think we would say somebody doesn't like to be poor. But I think what Paul wanted is an example perhaps in personal relations, how hatred gives rise to greed.
So I had this discussion before where we went back and forth between some people saying, well, all hatred results from greed. Or most examples of hatred you could try an example that's the result of greed, but is the opposite true? That's what I'm wondering.
That hatred can give rise to greed. I would have to sit down and think about it. Unless somebody can help me out.
I guess I can see sort of a roundabout example where if one hates another and the person that they hate has better stuff than them, that they would become greedy over their possessions.
I think that's a very possible example. Okay, so if this is an example, one person hates another, has a kind of deep resentment against another, and then the way in which he expresses that hatred towards the other, rather than manifesting it in the form of violence against that person, is by trying to get possession of that person's wealth or property, whatever. Yeah, that's an example.
Isn't it more likely that the hatred would arise as a result of greed for the person's possession?
That is the typical case. But we're trying to find an opposite case. And I think that it's quite psychologically possible where a person doesn't really have a deep-rooted greed for the other person's possessions in themselves, but just he has aversion towards that person and wants to take vengeance against that person by taking possession of that other person's belongings.
Maybe taking delight in someone else's misfortune. Greed.
Okay, that's a good example too.
I was going to say that actually among adolescent girls, you might hear somebody success reported, and one of the girls will say, "Oh, I hate her," and it's just a way of saying I envy that accomplishment.
Yeah.
You know, she has perfect hair. Oh, I hate her. I mean, it's hard to say what's cause and effect. It's just a kind of defensive attitude towards the world in general. That I didn't even know that I wanted to have perfect hair. But once I've seen it, suddenly it gives rise to, desire for what
Martha?
I think often that if you have hatred towards somebody, often your greed doesn't manifest to that person, it goes off in another direction. Like, for example, if you're really angry at your parent or something, a girl might go off on a shopping binge, and so the greed takes off.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one.
Okay. Anyway, we could work out different ways. Are there any other questions? Yeah, it's rather complicated. Any other questions? George?
Yes. You said that volition is karma. That was one of the sayings of the Buddha.
Yeah, that's one of the sayings of the Buddha.
I understand that arahants generate no karma.
That is so.
But does that mean that arahants have no volition?
A very good question. Arahants have volition, intention. Of course, in order to act, one has to have volition or intention. But that volition or intention doesn't generate new karma. That volition just arises. It will motivate whatever actions have to be done, and then it ceases. But it doesn't create any karma. Certainly, the arhat could not do anything unwholesome. Then whatever wholesome types of actions the arhat does don't create wholesome karma. Karma with the potential to ripen in the form of future births and bring fortunate results. Of course, there aren't any future births, rebirths. Okay, at this point, we have to stop. Okay, so we will continue next time. Very important section on the 4 nutriments, and probably we'll get also to the 4 noble truths. And we'll end with the sharing of the merits, with the devas, 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 with the devas,